Let's say you have your Hebrew Bible in front of you, you open Exodus 20, what do you see? You see a text looking like that, lots of things inside. You can clearly see that this one has no dots. No dots.
Welcome to episode number 4 of the Bible in OBRY. And for this episode, well, there's really no easy way to do this. I just decided, with last time doing the study on the roots of OBRY and a lot of the interesting things that we find, in a root study of a word. Because if we're willing to go all the way with any particular word study and root study, we end up finding out a lot of things that even the guys out there who, they have the impression that they're going pretty deep because they're breaking out the Strongs. Or maybe they have other concordances or lexicons that supposedly delve a little deeper into the studies of these words. And I've read so many out there that I honestly have to tell you, and from hundreds of years ago even, for the most part, they're all just repeating the same junk. And that's why I don't even want to call this a study. We're not. I just sometimes, I get these impressions of words if I've heard them in a negative way too much. I don't like them. We're gonna have a Bible study. Everybody, gather around. We're gonna have a Bible study. And what I'm going to do is I'm really just going to repeat other people's thoughts to you. I'm not going to really do any of my own thinking. I haven't really done much of any of my own work. I've just found a lot of stuff that other people said. And we're going to go with that. And we're going to have a good time. That's what's important. We're going to have a good time. And we're going to talk about our feelings. Okay. We're not doing that. We're really going to try to get to the root of, and that was actually kind of punny, because we do actually get to the roots. We get to the biglyph and triglyph roots. We're going to look at colors. Colors are important, not just in the Bible. Obviously, they're important in the Bible. They're important in most religions of the world. They're important in esoteric thought, the occult. They're important in art. If you want to express yourself, there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can use form, light, color, symbols. There's a lot of ways to express thoughts or emotions with the choice of the right color palette. I don't know of any nation or culture or people with any differing mindsets that don't have some basis in thought or symbolism that has to do with color. Color is mammothly important in the Bible. Because for one thing, when many of the prophets describe visions they have, there will be a lot concerning color to those visions. You might recall, Ezekiel's 2 visions of the throne room, Daniel's visions, the vision that John the Revelator had visions recorded of Christ, let's say on the Mount of Transfiguration, again, colors are employed. And colors are used in prophecy and metaphor to stand for things, to relay basic concepts and deep truths in ways that other words, obviously, since colors are so often used, in ways that other words would fall short. So the thing is, I could make this episode really, really long, and we still wouldn't be covering colors in the Bible, I'm afraid. I did a search the other day because I was just kind of preparing for, what I was going to do with this episode. I did a search of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, a dozen colors. And I know I missed some entries because there are word variation entries that I didn't get to that are also in there, and so that those aren't represented. But probably the main colors that you're going to see in the Bible are probably represented in these 12. The thing is, white had 10 different OBRY words, 9 and 1 Aramaic word. It had 7 entries for the color black, 10 entries for the color red, 1 for the color blue, 2 for yellow, 11 for green, 2 for purple, 3 for silver, 6 for gold, 1 for copper, 3 for crimson, and 3 for scarlet. And I knew after just perusing 2 of the colors and all of the results in both the OBRY and Hellen, or Greek, there was no way I was going to put together an episode. So this pretty much might just be the start of at least a few episodes that have to be done to explore color. Now, another thing that you're going to find concerning how important color is and our perceptions of the Bible and peoples, and you have factional belief systems. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Jews, Black Hebrew Israelites, the folks out there who believe that they're related to Jews, or let's say there's sects of people that believe that anyone who has ancestry that were living in America when, say, the early Europeans started coming here, according to popular history in the 1400s, that they are the Israelites. And even Christian identity and Israelite identity, everybody latches on to color passages. And even though the Bible is certainly a book that focuses on a specific homogeneous race of people, in the sense that from Adam to Noah, that's a homogeneous genealogy and race of people. Noah and his 3 sons and the children they produce, a homogeneous race of people. Most of the nations that you're going to see that are surrounding the sons of Yisrael, Bani Yisrael, they're homogeneous as well. They come from a similar stock. Even, for instance, the language Arami, which is called Aramaic. The language Arami comes from the northern neighbors that Yisrael had in the promised land, Aram. And in most of your Bibles, you're going to see that translated as Syria, because the people who did this want you to have a Middle Eastern mindset. They want you to believe these things happened in the Middle East. So they translate Aram as Syria. However, the whole point is Aram and Arphaxad were brothers. Later on in Arphaxad's line came OBRY, and then we have to extrapolate based on other timelines that OBRY was alive during the incident at the Tower of Babel, which is why he named his one son Peleg. But those two people are extremely similar, and it shouldn't be a surprise that so many conflicts happened fratricidally in the Bible. If you've paid attention to history in North America and Europe for the last century, there have been untold scores of fratricidal, shameful fratricidal conflicts. This is not an odd thing. And the amount of conflict and wars recorded in the so-called Old Testament are in no way any kind of testimony that these people were anything but extremely similar in racial type. So I don't think it's unnatural that anybody who would have a claim to that birthright of being Israelites, and when I say Israelites, I am including Judahites, Judah, Benjamin, Louis, or Judah, Benjamin, Levi, because prophetically, all the tribes, or the two nations that were divided in Rehoboam's day, would become again one people. So, under the banner, we'll say, of Yisrael, or Israel, as it's transliterated and anglicized. So it's important that we look at these things. It's not just about that contest of who's right in interpreting colors, but it also has a great deal to do with how we're interpreting symbolic, prophetic passages, and just symbolic ideas in general, because of how much color has to do with symbolism in the Bible. I'm going to read a little bit of a document here concerning colors and color symbolism. This just comes from ancient-symbols.com. And it's a little page called The Symbolism of Colors. Now, their interpretation of colors is something that is, it's not really digging too deep into any particular belief system. I think they were going for something pretty generic, just generic in general. And I don't know that they were even focusing on a particular mindset, because as I said, depending on the culture and the people, the mindset concerning color and significance of color can be different. And what a culture associates a color with can have a great deal to do with how someone reacts to a color, or how they feel about a color. So, as according to ancient-symbols.com, color is all around us, present everywhere we turn, as constant as the air we breathe. Perhaps it is inevitable that human society will associate certain colors with different significant aspects of our lives. Different cultures all around the world each have their own meanings for the different colors, and within these colors, their meanings have also changed over time. The ancient Egyptians used colors to represent the powers of their gods. In China, red was not always the most favored color. It was actually yellow. The ancient Mayans, on the other hand, regarded colors as a representation of the ordinal directions, north, south, east, and west, as well as many different gods in their belief system. Let us now look at the more contemporary meanings of each of the colors and understand their significance in our current cultures. Red symbolism. Red represents love, passion, fire, fury. It is considered the most intense color emotionally, stimulating the senses, causing faster heartbeat and breathing. Often red is used as the dominant color when warning signs are put up, seemingly signifying beware. On national flags, red is commonly used to symbolize the country's pride and strength, displayed more predominantly during times of conflict or war. Blue symbolism. The ancient Egyptians, why does everybody, and I blame, you know what, if you look into it, it's the Royal Society and then became the Royal Geographic Society. They're the ones who had set their sights on Egypt, Egyptology, and basically Middle Eastern studies and archaeology in the 1800s, and they did it with a vengeance, so that this Egyptology and this study of the Mayans and the few other cultures that they want to stick in our faces all the time, even though there were such a vast number of old civilizations that they could be talking far more about and just choose not to. I don't have anything against Egypt at all. You know, in fact, my work has in large part been an absolution towards Egypt and the Egyptians, since no portion of the Bible took place in or around Egypt. But, of course, that is part of the whole deception. So anyways, the ancient Egyptians associated the color blue with the gods like Amun, the god of the wind. It is the color of the oceans and of the skies. Quite opposite the color red, blue evokes feelings of calm, peace, and tranquility. It symbolizes loyalty, wisdom, and trust. It inspires creativity and deep thinking. This effect that the color blue has on the human psyche makes it a perfect color for spaces where rest and calm needs to be achieved, like bedrooms, libraries, or hospitals. Yellow symbolism. For the ancient Chinese, yellow symbolizes good luck and is often associated with gold. Throughout the ages, in most parts of the world, the color yellow is regarded as the color of wisdom and intellect. It enhances optimism, logic, and concentration. It stimulates speedy metabolism. Bright and cheerful, it represents the playfulness and carefree attitude of the young. Green symbolism is universally regarded as the color of nature and health. It stands for new life, growth, money, and safety. The god Osiris, and back to Egypt again, I guess, the god Osiris is well represented by the color green, for Osiris is the god of resurrection and fertility. During the Middle Ages, green was the color of choice for brides because it symbolized fertility. Green is the easiest color for the human eyes and can soothe and improve vision. It promotes calm and a feeling of crisp freshness all around. Next to blue, green is also a popular color scheme for hospitals and convalescent facilities. Well, don't you think that's interesting that our Creator put so much green and blue around us? That was from me. Purple symbolism. Do you think it's going to be associated with royalty? What do you think? Yes? No? Purple is the color of royalty or nobility. Kings and queens are often depicted in their finest using the color purple mixed with yellow or gold, which are actually opposites on the color wheel, and they work well together. It implies wealth, luxury, extravagance, and sophistication. It symbolizes magic, mystery, and power. Today, purple and yellow is most effective in promoting children's toys because it gives the appearance of fun and ease of play. I didn't know that. Orange symbolism. Orange is a healing color associated with luck and the warmth of the sun. It is believed to increase one's appetite for food. It stimulates creativity. Well, you know what? Then they should stop giving people at county jail orange jumpsuits to wear because they don't give us enough food. They give grown men 1,200 calories a day, and then all we're looking at is orange all the time. So that's not even nice. It stimulates creativity and enthusiasm, resulting in some relief from monotony and boredom. Even with traces of the hotness of red, orange is more gentle and controlled, yet not lacking in power and adaptability to change. Of course, they didn't mention how orange seems to be heavily associated with Freemasonry, occult, esoteric, the number 33. I don't know how much weight is behind that, but I've seen it enough from enough questionable characters to know that orange has some depth to occult symbolism. All right, so black symbolism. Black has always symbolized death and the underworld, yet it equally symbolizes authority and power. Quite ironically, with all the implied power behind it, black implies submission, which is why priests often wear the color to signify their submission to God. A more widely known use of the color black is to depict negativity and evil, hence the color of Dracula's cape. Fashion-wise, black is a popular color that stands out for formality and elegance, and making you not look like such a fat pig. They didn't write that last part. White symbolism. In ancient, here we go again, ancient Egypt. White stood for omnipotence and purity. They used, where hasn't it stood for that? They used this absence of color, or what some will say, it's absent of chroma. White is no color, or depending on who you talk to, because others will say white is actually the presence of all colors. They use this absence of color for ceremonial objects used in holy rituals. Everywhere else up to the present time, white also stands for purity and innocence. It depicts the highest sacred power of God. It stands for everything good, positive, clean, fresh, and heavenly. It is a popular color scheme for hospitals, charities, and nonprofit organizations to emphasize something good and positive. To me, it also kind of, sometimes, depending on the context, has sort of a sterility connotation to it. I guess that's probably what I've gotten from spending time in hospitals or being in institutions. Not that I've been, well, besides for the time I spent in jail, I've not been institutionalized, but, you think of it like doctor's offices, clinics, things like that. It feels more sterile is what white feels like rather than clean. And I think that's just, again, that's probably something that's far more cultural or subjective. Brown symbolism. Brown is the color of earth. It stands for life in general, real, solid, and reliable. It encourages feelings of warmth and security, a sense of strong connection with the earth. In medieval times, brown was associated with the humble lives of the monks, often close to poverty. Today, brown is used in modern interior design to depict something natural, of the earth, warm and living. And being a carpenter, and I did do a decent amount of painting in that. In the past, I've worked for guys who specialized in wallpaper also. But just from the standpoint of being a carpenter and also being an artist most of my life, really my background is art and music, but brown is a great color that when paired with other colors that are maybe a little brighter, it really is a great color for living space if you use it correctly. They go on to say, whether we realize the fact or not, color is a major part of our lives. They can quietly influence our emotions and consequently our decision-making processes. This knowledge should open up our minds to the possible ways by which we can make them an active and positive influence in our day-to-day existence. I agree 100%. Colors are an everyday part of our life. We react to colors. We've been programmed to react to certain colors. If we're driving, we're in our cars, and we see red, we think stop. If we see yellow, we think yield, or we think go like crazy, depending on who you are. We see green, go. So there's a certain extent to which we're programmed. Some people might look at white and think of purity. Some people might look at white and think of sterility. Some people might look at black and think of bad death. Some people might look at black and think of clean, orderly. A lot of the furniture around my sort of office nook, if you want to call it that, my office corner is mostly glass with black objects and finished wood. And, for me, that's the most pleasing arrangement. But anyways, so we're talking about the Bible, and we're talking about symbolism in the Bible and how it's important. And it is important. It's super, super, super important. Let's talk about a few passages in the Bible that probably everybody, if you're not very familiar with these passages, you've probably at least heard them once, and you at least know that these are symbolic passages. And being symbolic passages, what that implies is that there is something deeper and probably something hidden that is meant to be figured out, solved, and determined from these hidden symbols. So, okay. One of the most famous ones, because people tend to get a lot of views or a lot of reads when they talk about this subject, is Revelation. There's actually a couple in Revelation, but I will start with probably the most well-known or most popular in esoteric and eschatological circles. Revelation 17, verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. The funny thing is, based on the color scheme used here and other things, you have the precious stones, pearls, a golden cup in her hand. Now, if these colors, let's say, began with script written in OBRY, and then possibly went from OBRY to Aramee, or predominantly Aramee speakers, translating it into Elen, Koine Greek. And they didn't get the colors right. Or these colors and these items don't quite match up with the original OBRY wording and intent. Then, of course, it's going to drastically change what we make of the symbolism that's being portrayed here. People have used the color scheme, for instance, purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones. They've used it to point at the Roman Catholic Church, while their cardinals wear red, and often we see various officials in purple. Well, we also see them in white, too. I believe guys like Ted Pike would have used this color scheme to point to Judaism. However, the colors that he would be thinking of would be colors specified in the early testaments as per what the Levim or Levites and Ken Egedul or the high priests would be wearing. And again, if we don't know if the words in LN as they've been translated into English match up with the words in OBRY, we're going to get it wrong. Now, Revelation's a perfect book that's just loaded with color symbolism, from the angel that John the Revelator sees at the beginning and the way that he describes him. Now, a lot of people will say, well, no, that's Jesus or Yusho. And I don't know, because, of course, within the first couple of verses, it says that he, Yusho, sent his angel to deliver this message. So it's kind of a rough one, but he uses colors. He uses objects. Oftentimes, when somebody says gold, of course, yes, they could be talking about gold, the metal, but it also has a color. I mean, we have color representations of gold, of silver, of brass, copper, bronze. But, Revelation has, say, the color symbolism of the dragon in both Revelation 12 and Revelation 17. There's color all over in Revelation. There's color frequently used all through the New Testament. And, another really good passage as far as color is when John the Revelator is describing the throne room. In Revelation 4 and 3, he says, and he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine. I thought it was sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, and sight unto like an emerald. So we get these visions in our head based on colors that are being used. Another book that's just full of color symbolism is Zechariah. And for anybody who's read Zechariah, and one thing that will stick out to you is a lot of colored horses in a number of visions. And they have to symbolize things. Furthermore, Ezekiel. This is another heavy book in visions and in color. When first he sees his vision in Ezekiel 1, he describes what the living creatures are carrying. And I'm doing this on the fly. I'm not pausing to get to my particular verse, so please bear with me. Describing the creatures, their feet were straight feet. The sole of the feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. So again, we're getting visions in our head. That's the way that language works. And that's why language has to be correct. We have to know what the speaker or writer intended for us to think, imagine, envision, and so on. Further forward, what I wanted to get to was the platform that they were apparently, it seems as though they're carrying a platform. So, not wanting to waste too much space, scrolling forward to find the platform and the colors of that platform. Well, we've got, here he describes a firmament actually above them. And in Ezekiel 1:26, he says, "And above the firmament that was over their heads was like the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as an appearance of a man above upon it. I saw the color of amber as the appearance of fire round about within it, from the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward. I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had a brightness round about, as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in a day of rain. So was the appearance of the brightness round about." This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of Yahweh. "And when I saw it, I fell upon my face. I heard a voice of one that spake." Lots and lots and lots of color symbolism. There's also other really important color passages and suggestions of color, like I went over in the last episode concerning Oreb, and the suggestion of color or a darkness in the word Oreb. Or like how the Bible wants you to know in Genesis, it really, really wants you to know that Oshu, Esau, and remember, his name, Oshu, they gave him that because it basically means done or finished. Because when he came out, he was red all over with a lot of hair. It was, in a sense, almost an ironic name, like that he was done like a man. That's just such a strange sight to even think about. Anyways, it is after he trades his birthright to his brother Jacob for the mess of red pottage that he garners the name Adum, meaning red. And it is said at least a couple, if not a few times, Oshu is Adum. The Bible wants you to know in the book of Genesis that Esau is red. Edom. So close to Adam, and we're of course going to cover Adam at a point, that oftentimes if you see Adami as in Edomites, it is represented without the affixed u, which I said happens oftentimes to roots when you get suffixes added onto them. So you might see a, da, m, e, without that affixed u. So the Bible wants you to know that Edom is red. We're also all pretty familiar with those passages that equate this symbolism of sin with red and the purity of being forgiven, washed, made clean of that sin with white. I just can't really even see a productive or in-depth Bible conversation without addressing colors. Now, I'm going to give you my impressions of the origins of colors, and specifically the origins of colors in the Bible. For any of you who were fortunate enough to have a decent box of Crayola crayons when you were a kid, I remember all I had was like this little old box container or something full of random crayons that I had kind of picked up anywhere and everywhere, probably from siblings and friends and everything else, for the longest time that I would have to use to color with, except for, I think it was in 2nd grade, I won a coloring contest that they were having county-wide of a certain picture. You just had to color it. You had to use crayons, color it. I used my clunky box of crummy crayons and colored it, and they must have been impressed because I was using types of shading and blending that you don't normally see kids use with crayons. So I won the contest, and one of the things I got for winning was this really awesome box of Crayola crayons. And it was the one that had the crayon sharpener. It had every conceivable color that Crayola had created. And I remember a lot of the colors in there had names like peach or rose. Now, they didn't have a color named ivory that I remember, but I am throwing in ivory and ebony just to make point. Back when I was young, they had colors in there like flesh, and it was the color of a Caucasian, until that became so politically incorrect. But there were a great many, melon, and maize, and I'm sure that there's a lot of you that are thinking of colors from that uber box of Crayola crayons that were really named after naturally occurring things or elements. Sky blue. Many of them actually bore the names of natural pigments that had been being used for paints for at least centuries on end. And I'm going to cover that a little bit so we can get an idea where colors come from and the mindset behind colors. Because in the Bible and at that time and the people and even the mindset of who is inspiring it and writing it, I don't think that anywhere in that mindset is the color wheel as we've come to know it today, with the 3 primaries, red, blue, and yellow, and then your secondary colors and your tertiary colors, and all of the, different colors that you can mix from all of that. The thing about pigments is, and how pigments have been used in colors, specifically paints, since paint has been the color medium of choice for, forever. You end up with colors that any of you who have used oils or acrylics, artist colors, and artist mediums, you'll be familiar with certain names of colors, and there's a reason for that, because all of these colors have been derived originally, or at least a long time ago, before more synthetic processes were developed and employed, and we found that sometimes those didn't work out very well. But they would typically, historically, traditionally, be derived from things that were amply represented in nature, or sometimes not as amply so, and if that were the case, it would typically make that pigment far more sought after. So it's the reason why you'll see things like this. This is from the page. It's all about crushed art pigments, traditionally used in paints. So derivatives of white pigment. White paint was originally derived from powder, gesso, chalk, or lime, sedimentary minerals found in abundance in rocks, but later lead white was used for its high opacity and brilliance. Sadly, this toxic pigment was also used for priming, interior decor, and cosmetics, which made it the probable cause of illness. This color was banned in the late 20th century to be replaced with zinc white and titanium. Titanium white is made from an oxide that has a high refractive index, meaning it causes light to scatter in different directions, with opacity and brilliance to match lead white. Titanium white is commonly used today. So for anybody who has worked in oils or acrylics, or it might even be represented in other types of artistic mediums, you're probably familiar with titanium white. You're probably familiar with Mars black. Mars black is made from an iron oxide. A lot of these colors are oxidated metals. They derived pigments from minerals. There's a lot of things they would derive pigments from, but you know, the one reason that you won't if you go to buy basic standard oil colors, you're going to have a hard time, maybe not so much today as even 50 years ago. You would have a very hard time finding red, just red. You see, because those colors, they've been standardized for this idea of the color wheel with primary, secondary, tertiary, and so forth. You would have a hard time finding just yellow or just blue and so on. Orange, green, you name it. What you would find things like ultramarine blue, which was derived from a pigment that was made from a semi-precious stone, lapis lazuli. Or you might find Prussian blue. This was an early synthetic blue. You might find phthalo blue, another synthetic blue. But this is why you're going to find these colors with these names, because they're named after the elements or minerals or processes that they were derived from. And the whole point of all of that is I've got a feeling that what we're going to find when we dig into this is that the colors that we can determine beyond a shadow of a doubt are what they say are going to be derived from naturally occurring elements. And I'm going to give you a prime example, okay? The word for blood in OBRY is dem. It is da-em. It's a biglyph, dem. Dem is the root of a great many derivative words that mean or allude to the color red. So you see where I'm going with this. Just like with pigments being derived from colors that we find in nature. In the same way, I believe that we're going to find the origins of these words used for colors by hunting down the biglyphs or possibly triglyphs, if we're able to even do that. Mostly the biglyphs. By hunting them down and finding out what is it that these most likely are, so we can determine what these colors are, and if these words that have been translated into colors, because I mean my goodness, you have 10 different words, or 9 in OBRY that they're using for the color white, and are all of those correct? And if they're not, it could drastically change our perceptions, not only of symbolic passages of the Bible, which everything's symbolic. We have to somehow translate, we have to figure out what it stands for, or realistic, real world, tangible things. Colors that mean things like Esau is Edom, or Oshu is Adum, red. Because all of those things in the early Testament, the so-called Old Testament, those prophecies, specifically eschatological prophecies and symbolic eschatological prophecies, were meant as a guide for us in the latter days. Revelation serves as a sort of cipher of so many of those eschatological prophecies of the books of the early Testament. So these colors are so important that we get them right, and we determine, are any of these words, are all of these words, are some of these words that are being translated as these colors, are they correct? So I'm not going in any specific order other than the order that I just started searching them out, punching them in the other day, and we're going to move through them as we can. As we do go through them, I am going to keep notes on which ones are correct and which ones are probably not correct. If a color is some other color that it wasn't translated to, I will mark that down as well. And when we're able to get through these colors, we will definitely review them and, as much as possible, start applying them to passages, specifically really key, really important passages where color is so vital. All right, so enough with the introduction. Let's just dive in and start with white. White, which is said to be absent of chroma, and that may well be true, since light actually contains all the colors of the spectrum, depending on what sort of spectrum you look at it in. Like if you filter it through a prism, then it would have all of those colors within it. However, white as a color, although it is the best reflector of light, and I don't know if we're going to be able to see that reflected in the roots that we cover or not, it is absent of chroma, which is why, well, for one thing, it sort of is and sort of isn't very fair and accurate to call, Noahites or Europeans white. Sure, as far as complexion goes, and in comparison to the other races, the complexion is lighter. But, if you look in the mirror and see white, you should get to a doctor. There's typically more red because the blood vessels tend to show in the skin of so-called white people far better than anyone else's skin. So the first word they have entered as being white is boots. In fact, real quickly, these are the OBRY words they have entered as white. Boots, dar, hur, hari, leben, and leben again, tza, tzaha, tzahar, tzahar again, and rear. One thing I noticed, just because I'm looking at it instead of saying it, and the easiest way for you to follow along or check is open up blueletterbible.org, and in the top window where you can punch in words or verses, there's a little window right to the right of it that says KJV. You just leave it on that and type in white, and then a screen will come up, and it should have 4 tabs on it. The tabs will say primary, dictionaries, lexiconic, and FAQs. Click on lexiconic, and then there is another type window at the top of that. There are 3 bubbles below that type window saying exact match, beginning of the word, or any part of the word. For this, go with exact match and click that. The nice thing about doing, like, say, beginning of the word, which I could click beginning of the word, is, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I get 11 entries when I put in beginning of the word. I get 2 hurs, and the 1 extra I get is, let me see. I get an extra Hari? No, I already had that. Oh, I'm wrong. It's 11 with the Aramaic. Anyways. So these are the different ways to match. If you do any part of the word, you're going to get a lot. I mean, a lot. So if you typed in a word, let's say like east, and you didn't select the exact match, you would also get results for beast, breast, anything that contains east within the word somewhere. And you would think it'd be a good thing, Eastern and all, but that's not the way it works. It's like I just said, beast, breast, they both have east within them. So you want to try to whittle it down a little bit. Either exact match or beginning of the word. Beginning of the word works really good with some colors, like if you're punching in red, then you'll get the results that would be like redden, reddish, reddening, things like that. So I'll start with the first entry, boots, to see if that gets us any positive results on white. If you click on the boots itself, it will take you to Blue Letter Bible's Strong's entry. I don't use Blue Letter Bible mostly just because I think it's just the best version of Strong's out there. A lot of different Bible software sites have a Strong's, and a lot of them have strengths, and a lot of them have weaknesses. Just like eSword has the KJC, and it has a Strong's. It has strengths, and it has weaknesses. So that's why it's really good if you can use a few of the same thing. The one really nice thing is any of the Bible sites or softwares that has a Strong's Concordance that gives you entries. Entries are always really good, whether they're accurate or not. And by the way, none of them agree. Just to let you know, they don't. The Strong's OBRY list that I'm constantly, re-editing, recompiling, and using as a more and more expansive tool, I am currently adding to it the number of entries of each one of those words to the right of each word, which has been a really daunting task to have to do that. I know that certain concordances, versions of the concordance, are going to disagree. Concordances from the start of concordances, or concordant. What would be the plural of that? Probably concordances. They've been revised a number of times, just like the King James Bible and almost any other version that's old enough for there to be either a need for revision or just a need for more sales. Anyways, so that would be why they would oftentimes disagree, but usually not so much to where it's just amazing how much they disagree. Like, there would not be a version of the concordance that I would be aware of. Strong's, that is. That, for instance, this H948, Butz, is listed as appearing 8 times in Blue Letter Bible. But I don't think you're going to find it in any other concordance where it's going to be even 10 or 12 times, or 3 or 4 times. It's typically going to be very close to that. You'll have to excuse me. My voice is very dry. I think it's just the weather. It's going cold and dry. But sometimes in the Strong's for eSword, you'll get certain listings that in, say, Blue Letter Bible or maybe the Bible Hub Strong's, these entries are listed as one occurrence, but you try to look them up in the KJC or the Strong's in eSword, and they'll actually say 0 entries for that number, which of course doesn't make any sense. If a number had 0 entries, there would be no even list it. But it happens. It happens, believe me. Don't get discouraged should you find that. So they give us the definition of this boots, which was our first entry in a search for white. It looks white to me. The first is, it's only one definition. The definition is byssus, a costly, fine white linen cloth made in Egypt. Oh, it's made in Egypt. Well, could be made in Egypt today. If you look at the entries, so let's say 1 Chronicles 4:21, and the families of the house of them that wrought fine linen, of the house of Ashbia, let's see, and David was clothed with a robe of fine linen. And it goes on. 2 Chronicles 2:14. This is describing the temple being built, skillful to work in gold and in silver, in brass and iron and stone and timber, in purple and blue and fine linen and in crimson. And he made the veil of blue and purple and crimson and fine linen. That's interesting because I'm seeing all of these passages where I'm expecting a color, but I keep getting fine linen or white linen. Let's see, 2 Chronicles 5:12, and also the Luim, Levites, which were the singers, all of them of Asaph and Heman and Jeduthun. I hate these transliterations of names. With their sons and their brethren, being arrayed in white linen, having cymbals and psalteries and harps. Now, that's the only one that doesn't seem odd because it doesn't have colors around it. Esther 1:6, which I don't use Esther very much. I don't really trust Esther. I'll use it sometimes for comparatives, but let's say that there's an OBRY word entry and it only appears in Esther. Then it becomes highly suspect. Let's see, it says, where were white, green, and blue hangings fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple 2 silver rings and pillars of marble. That one we definitely would want to check in the actual Hebrew text. And again, Esther 8:15, a crown of gold with a garment of fine linen. The last one is in Ezekiel 27:16. They occupied in the fairs with emeralds, purple, and broidered work, and fine linen, and coral, and agate. Now, one of the best things you can do, as I've stated before, is if you have an entry like this is H948. In fact, I'm going to start saying the Strong's entry numbers without the H, because unless I'm in the Greek or Helen, which that could get confusing, it's actually Ellen, so it would be in my world. But unless I'm in the New Testament or any Greek in particular, I'm just going to say the number, and it's usually going to be in the Hebrew or OBRY. But there's going to be times that I'll hit the Greek too. So if you go to your KJC tab in eSword and punch it in, what you'll be able to do, I'll describe this again. Punch that in and it will come up in the window, the dictionary's window, that entry. And then just click on, it doesn't matter, click on the first entry. Make sure one of your Hebrew Old Testament tabs is open, whether you get the Hebrew Old Testament plus Strong's numbers from the download tab in eSword itself, or whether you go to BibleStudyTools.com and get they're called Hebrew Study Bibles. There's I think 5 versions of them. I mostly just keep HSB 2, 3, and 4. However, all 3 of them, well, no, not all 3 of them, I'm sorry. Yeah, wait. No, just HSB 2 and 3 have the strong numbers in there as well. So just click on that entry down in your dictionaries window. The first one is just fine. And remember what your number is. It's 948. Make sure you're in a Hebrew Old Testament plus strong numbers of some type or another. And keep in mind, the one that eSword makes available in their dictionaries tab, that one has a number of missing verses in certain books. That's why you would also want to have those HSB versions. For me, the Hebrew Old Testament, it comes with a more modern Hebrew character, and it has no nikudot at all. Whereas the HSB 2, 3, and 4, they have the nikudot, and they are in the more calligraphic Hebrew style, which I find not very pleasing to the eye. Okay, so when you find the number within the verse, and you're looking for number 948, and I'm just doing this in real time with you here, you're gonna see right off the bat that Strong's listings are deceptive. They're deceptive in a really important way. Now, I don't know enough yet. I don't know enough yet about Strong's personally, his process, who he was involved with, and everything else to make particular judgments on him or his work. Now, I really disagree with Christopher Johnson on his KJV only stance and a number of his doctrines and belief systems. But he did a series on the different concordances and lexicons that are available and the people who were behind them, who put them together, conceived of them, and what these people were about and what they believed and possibly their motives. Christopher Johnson also, he has a website too. It's something to do with creation. I think he started in very much kind of like a Kent Hovind sort of vein. These days, and for a long time, he's denounced Kent Hovind. But anyways, if you find his channel, and you should, on YouTube, you will find his series on concordances and lexicons. And it will give you some really interesting insights to who was behind them. Anyways, what you're going to see is buts. You're not going to see the oo in there. Now, I know I told you that certain so-called vowels or singers are often dropped with suffixes, sometimes with prefixes too, but I don't see it as often. The thing is, you're often going to see it, these entries without prefix or suffix that are going to appear differently than they were entered into Strong's. So right-click on the number, go to Quick Search on H948 and select Old Testament, and that's going to show you its entries. They will be highlighted in usually either yellow or blue, and the word will be to the right of it. Don't get thrown off by the prefixes and suffixes. So the first one we'll see is the one that we were just on, ebats, and then we'll see it as boots in 1 Chronicles 15:27, and we will see it as babuts in 2 Chronicles 2:13, which would be and in boots is essentially what it's saying there. And then we'll see it as end boots or boots in 2 Chronicles 3:14. Boots again, boots, boots. The interesting thing is we see it with prefixes in all of the passages, well, not all, but a number of passages after that first one, and the U hasn't been dropped. This is what I'm trying to say. There is such a small amount of consistency in the Strong's listings. And now those Strong's listings, for whoever Strong's was and whatever his intentions were, and whatever the intentions of King James translators and various English translators were, whatever it is, remember that they still are basing what they're doing, how they're translating, or how Strong's is entering and listing these things heavily on the Masoretic parsing of words. Now, as I'm going along here, I'm going to be doing a lot of stop-start recording. The reason is, as we move through this, when I reach any spot where I have to look through something and think something out, or figure out what the best next move is, I'm going to pause it just so that you don't have all that excessive time that isn't as productive for you. So if any of this seems a bit choppy, that's why. I did want to also mention, if I haven't yet, when you bring up these Hebrew passages, and always until you become more comfortable and more fluent, which I've been looking at reading and interpreting Hebrew, both as Hebrew, so from right to left orientation with Hebrew characters, and as in OBRY with left to right orientation and OBRY characters for a couple years now. And although I can look at any given Hebrew text of the Bible and just by sight know what most of the words and roots are referring to, the thing is, it's always just the easiest and usually the quickest and the most productive because of what you can do. If there's another word in any one of these passages that I want to take a look at, see its KJC entry or Strong's entry or whatever, I can click on that number while this window is up, and it will show me that. I can float the mouse over the numbers for the words, and it will give me the Hebrew with the Nikudot and with the Masorete's pronunciation of it, and then what they pass off as a definition. This is one of the worst things about the concordances that come along with eSword. The definitions are often so ridiculous in their length and in their ambiguity. Look, I'm in 2 Chronicles 3:14, the list that I told you to right-click on to bring up all those occurrences of boots. All right, in 2 Chronicles 3:14, just to the left of my boots entrance is the word uiol. Okay, they say that it is the ole root, which they enter as H5927. If you float over that, honestly, the definition for it is ridiculously long. It literally says a primitive root, semicolon, to ascend intransitively, in parentheses, be high, or active, in parentheses, mount, semicolon, used in a great variety of senses, primary and secondary, literally and figuratively, colon, hyphen, arise, in parentheses, up, in parentheses again, cause to, ascend up, at once, break, in brackets, the day, in parentheses, up, bring, in parentheses, up, in parentheses, cause to, burn, carry up, cast up, plus sign, shoe, climb, and I'm only halfway through the drop-down window definition. You're not going to make any sense of that. It's redonkulous. So when that happens and you need to take a little less confusing look at a verse, I can't tell you how helpful. Now, some interlinears are just fine. So if you wanted to, say, go to Bible Hub and use the interlinears, those are helpful, absolutely. But also if you go to Q Bible and you, on the homepage, you click on the Hebrew Bible, and then the next screen that they'll give you will allow you to click on the book. And you should get a screen with the book and all the chapters. You click on your chapter and verse, and it will take you to the chapter wherever in the verse that you clicked on, okay? This is the one I told you has Hebrew to the left, the Masoretic dictation of pronunciation in the middle, which you don't need. And to the right, it basically has King James with sort of ad hoc Hebrew. Mostly proper names and such are going to show up in Hebrew. The nicer thing about this is if you take your mouse and you scroll over the Hebrew words. Let me just take it to the exact same passage I was in 2 Chronicles 3:14. So I'll just pick 2 Chronicles and go to 3:14 in the window that shows up. And remember, I was at the word uiol, which they said was the root ole, H5927. Well, when I float over it here at Q Bible, the definition is so much shorter. Essentially, it says a primitive root, semicolon, to ascend intransitively, be high, in parentheses, or active, mount, in parentheses, used in a great variety of senses, primary and secondary, literally and figuratively. Now, that's all they really needed to say. If you want all of that gibberish that you can get when dealing with anything coming from the Masoretes or Strongs or whatever, then by all means keep floating over those entries in eSword. But it is very simple in the 3 that have varied ways that they present interlinear or Strongs that are decent because of how different they present them, the information, and that you might find helpful is Q Bible, then of course Blue Letter Bible, which I use the most for Strongs, and Bible Hub, and then there is oh gosh, I forgot the other one. I keep it on standard because it has 1 or 2 features that's pretty good. Bible Study Tools. BibleStudyTools.com. And I hope I didn't give the wrong address to get the various other modules for eSword. I hope I said it was BibleSupport.com. Okay, so anyways, back to boots, and how can we find out if boots actually means white or a color whatsoever, or if it just refers to linen, because a fabric per se is not necessarily a color, as linen can be dyed, and it is dyed with tints of colors, so if it's that, then it's going to be an entirely different category. I have taken a look at all of these passages in context, and since none of these verses actually has any comparatives, which can be really helpful. If we have passages that have things, comparisons in them, such as like white as snow, white as wool, and either snow, shelag, or wool can be verified in other passages, then we can be far more well assured that that word probably does mean white or whatever color it's referring to. So what we're going to have to do, since we can't find a comparative word in this listing of boots, we want to see if there are any other buts, basically consisting of pretty much just the be and the tsa together, or any words that, let's say, are simple triglyphs that would have that buts root in them, because those are going to tell us a lot more. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through what a word study in OBRY would maybe typically look like when I have to do one. As I go, I'm going to give you the impressions of the glyphs themselves, and why I have these impressions, and what tools I'm using as I go, to just try to give you as much clarity as possible as far as the process. Okay. So I've got this word. I'm trying to figure out. It's H948, boots. I've looked at it in context, and while I've had that window up with all those entries of boots, I also had the Blue Letter Bible entry of boots 948 up, so that what I could do is I could click back and forth between the eSword window and that Blue Letter Bible window, and I could look at the passages in English and look at the passages in Hebrew. And I could see if there was any wording around that actual word that would be a red flag, that would tell me either the English was poorly represented or something's kind of wrong in there. Perhaps there is a word in there that's been misrepresented. That's a comparative word. That's going to tell me a lot more about the word I'm looking at. Unfortunately, when I look through here, what I don't have is I don't have words immediately around it, and it's usually going to be after it. That's going to start with the glyph ka, which looks the most like our English K. When you see a preceding word with that ka, that's usually your indication of a simile, because ka as a prefix is used most often as like or as. It's a comparative, and it's most often going to be comparing the word that it's prefixed to with the word preceding it. So anyways, I can see that just by looking that I don't have that. And within the context of this, I'm so sorry about the coughing and the dry voice this morning. I don't have any other words, even within the passages, that are giving me comparison. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my OBRY Strong's list. And there is at the bottom, and if you don't have this on the software you're using, which If you downloaded the PDF version of this, you might be using Adobe Acrobat or other PDF readers. I know that, like, even Microsoft Edge is oftentimes Windows 10's default PDF reader. In that case, also hitting the Control F should bring up the search box. And if you stick with the characters I put in the chart at the front, it should search correctly. If it doesn't, as I've said in the past, you can just send me an email through the OBRY project website, which the address is always in the description, no matter if you're listening to this on YouTube or at BitChute or at Anchor.fm or any one of the other podcast sites that Anchor distributes it to. It should be in the description of all of those. You go to obryproject.info, send me an email, tell me you want the current working original that I have of the Strong's OBRY list. It is not finished. You're going to notice that, for instance, the entries, as far as the amount of occurrences of each word that's going to be to the right of each word, it's not finished. I think I'm only in, I may be in tha right now, so I'm only about a third through. But I will send you it so that you can open it in either LibreOffice or Microsoft Office, or anything that is similar to that will read that type of document will open this. And it's really easy to then work with it within those. Because, for instance, I guarantee you that my letter chart, as far as what keys on the typewriter, do definitely work in there. I will also send you the OBRY Beta 3 font I have. You can load that in and use that too. Just send me an email and you got it. So with that open, what I do is I type in the search box to the lower left in LibreOffice, which is what I use. I type in the B and X. The X on the keyboard stands for the glyph tsa. When I do that, I get a lot of results. Typically, I usually try to stick with the shortest results. So the 2 and 3 character words, or biglyphs and triglyphs. And what I come up with is really interesting. So I'll typically have maybe 4 or 5 Blue Letter Bible, Strong's Concordance windows open at once, so that I can type in a number of things and scroll through, look at them. Some of the results that come up with the buts in it are like H6908, kibbutz. Now, what's interesting is you've probably heard this in a Jewish context, as their little communes that they put all over the place for really interesting work they were doing over in Palestine, especially in the early days. They called them kibbutzes. It comes from this root, kibbutz. The Strong's definition is to gather or assemble, and it gives you various different definitions for various different verb tenses. But mostly gather, assemble is pretty decent in all the contexts I've seen it in, gather. Now, you'll find other like triglyphs, like rabats. Now, rabats, it's not deceptive, but you might be confused, because you'll see that its definition is to stretch oneself out or lie down. And you might find that it's non-harmonious with a number of the other roots that we're going to look at. And the thing you always have to remember if you're looking at a triglyph, the biglyph root of it could be the first 2 glyphs or the last 2 glyphs. In this case, because it's not going to match with the majority of what else we're going to see, the most likely root of it is the rab root, which I covered a bit in the last episode and episode number 2, Reb, and what Reb is. Reb is usually to multiply or spread out, widen or wide. All of the words having to do with that root. So you can see that that is most likely the root. Now the tsa factors in as a, oh boy, I get way ahead of myself. As a, sorry, a modifier. So it's a singular modifier glyph. Anyways, so another entry would be H7660, which is Shabbats. Now, Shabbats is better because I believe that the biglyph root is butts, which is what we're looking for. The definition of it is to weave in checkered or plaited work. Now, that's the definition, but you always want to go down and look at how it's used in the text. It's got 2 entries. The first one is Exodus 28:20. And the 4th row, a beryl and an onyx and a jasper. They shall be set in gold in their enclosings. And then Exodus 28:39, and thou shalt embroider the coat of fine linen, and thou shalt make the mitre of fine linen. You're going to see why that is important and why this word Shabbats is in harmony with our other butts roots that we're looking at. Because lucky for us, and this doesn't always happen, but yes, lucky for us, there's actually a butts root. It's H1206. The thing is, it has 1 occurrence. Now, besides for that H1206, we also have Batse, Batsur, Batsi, Batsir, Batsal, and then we have some longer, like 5 glyph entries. Then Batso, Batsak, Batsur. I can tell you that once it gets to Batsir, the tsir is the root of at least a copious amount of those entries. So if we're not convinced by Bats itself and its single entry, we can check those others. Remember, every time you do that, you want to make sure that you're not looking at a biglyph represented by the last 2 glyphs. This is not something that you're going to acquire immediately. It's something that definitely takes time, because there are a lot of these entries that are incorrect. There are a lot that are misrepresented. It's work. I mean, this stuff is work. I'm not going to lie to you. It is serious, sometimes exhausting, tedious work. But what would you expect? Would you really expect something so childish or simplistic, inspired by the supreme being? If I had any pretenses of that years ago, they've all been lost. Now, I suppose that starting with Butts itself, H1206, it'd probably be the most helpful to move through these listings one after the other to show you how they are most probably correctly parsed out. Now, I said that Bot's entry, H1206, it only has 1 occurrence. It's in Jeremiah 38:22. And behold, all the women that are left in the king of Judah's house shall be brought forth to the king of Babylon's princes. And those women shall say, thy friends have set thee on, and have prevailed against thee. Thy feet are sunk in the mire, and they are turned away back. Now, besides the first half of that verse being a bit questionable concerning the people involved in what's going on per se, I've already looked at the latter part of that verse, and the surrounding words would make it evident that in context, Meyer is at least close to an accurate rendering of butts. Now, if I'm in Blue Letter Bible and I'm on this entry, all I have to do is hit the forward arrow, the arrow going to the right on my keyboard, and it will take me to the next entry, 1207, which is batse. It has the at the end, which I said it oftentimes, well, they would call it feminine and masculine. They'll do this with prefixes and suffixes and so on and so forth. I don't want you to get caught up in the sexes sort of aspect to it, as much as it being maybe more symbolic to say that the feminizes it, okay? It has 3 entries. Those entries are Job 8:11. Can the rush grow up without mire? Can the flag grow without water? Job 40:21. He lieth under the shady trees and the covert of the reed and fens. They decide to make it fens in there. But Ezekiel 47:11. But the miry places thereof and the marshes thereof shall not be healed. So in Job 40:21, it might be more appropriate just to say mire or marsh instead of fens. Now, when we get to the next entry, 1208, we see batsur. So we have it spelled as be-tsa-u-er. Now, when you have a vowel or singer that's affixed in between an existing biglyph like tsur, that's usually a red flag that your root is probably not bats, but probably tsur. And you can see that in the definition. So you move forward, the next is batsi, and that's just a name. So that's not going to tell you much. The one after that is batsir. Again, you have the E that is affixed between the tsa and the air. So that's probably the root, not bats. You move forward and you have batsal. Interesting, batsal only has one occurrence and it is of onion. Could it be onion? Perhaps. If it is, the bats makes more sense, but we can't entirely confirm that. The next is batsal al. So that must be the onion of God, I'm guessing. It's a proper name. So a number of these are then proper names. You have in 1214 batso, which would say the definition of it as a verb to cut off or break off. And that's basically how it's used, though it's used in a lot of different ways. The first passage is cut me off. The next is gained. The next is covet or covetous. Then greedy. And in fact, when you look through all the passages, greedy, the idea of greedy and covetous works well here with batso. And then there's many others. The end of the day, based on all of the roots that you're going to accumulate and you can determine are more likely bats as the biglyph root. What you should end up seeing in that is this idea of moving inward. And here's going to be just a step deeper in that, is looking at what at least I have come to understand in the glyphs themselves. All right, be. With be, there's the advantage of the fact that be is a really common prefix. When you see be prefixed on a word, it is always going to mean essentially in with by. It is essentially pulling the word or the root that proceeds it towards itself. Or, for instance, as I mentioned an episode or two ago, there is the root ba, which is just be and ah, which always means come or brought and always has the sense, of bringing in or coming instead of going. Coming towards instead of away from. That's a very instructive root. So you have the be, and you already know that the be is used all the time for that bringing in of whatever glyphs or roots or fuller words that precede it. So then the key thing after that is going to be to try to figure out the tsa. What is the tsa representing or symbolizing? One of the best ways to do that is to find all of the very simple roots that you can that use tsa. You want to find all the roots that start with the glyph tsa. You want to find all of the roots that are simple, like butts, and have the tsa at the end, and start making sense of them. Now, the one that's actually the most telling of probably all of them is the fact that there is an entry that's not called a biglyph. It's actually entered as a triglyph, but it's very telling because I have found it in the text as simply just the biglyph tsa. And that entry is H6627. And I am going to punch that in real quick. Give me a second here. 6627. 6627. Enter. Now here's what's interesting. The definition that you're going to get is, it's of course going to define it as a feminine noun because of the at the end, but there's an interesting twist to that. They define it as filth, human excrement, or excrement feces, okay? And it shows up in that form in two passages, Deuteronomy 23:13, and thou shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee. And that's where you would see that sa'eh. And Ezekiel 4:12, thou shalt eat it as barley cakes, you shall bake it with dung that cometh out of a man in their sight. Some might remember that portion of Ezekiel where he was told to bake his bread with that sa'eh of a man. All right. So there's going to be times when you can find in the text tsa, just the tsa and ah together. Tsa'eh. So here's the interesting twist about it. And what they actually do is they give you a verb root of yitsa. Now, I've told you before that I have a great suspicion that the ich at the front of a word, since many words are both verb and noun and descriptive, oftentimes is going to be a flag to tell you that it is a verb or action as opposed to the others. Yitsa's 33:18, and it is actually as a verb, forth, bring, come, proceed, go out, as opposed to the ba, remember, coming in, tsa, going out, or moving. I think moving is far more appropriate for the tsa as opposed to having a connotation of going away from. Now, that is my impression because of what we're going to see with the root bats. Because we have that be, which is sort of pulling whatever is after it towards it. But then we have the tsa. Now, if the tsa actually meant going forth or out, that might be a contradiction, lest we understand that that tsa is moving. Now, I'm not saying that the glyph of tsa itself means movement per se. If you check with sources like the Ancient Hebrew Research Center or the other ones that teach very similar things, they'll show you as the oldest glyph known for the tsa, it's sort of a circle with kind of a moving tail behind it. It looks sort of like a sperm or tadpole or something, but they tell you that that actually means a journey and destination. For once, I think that they're very close, and in a number of their definitions, I think they're close. It's just that the way that they're applying them is very, very confusing. Now, does tsa represent a journey and destination, or just movement in general? I'm not yet entirely sure. You have to understand, for instance, one word that you're going to see the tsa in a lot is the word oats, and it just consists of o and tsa, and oats is tree. If you see otsem, it can be bone, body, or the core of the body. It's the reason for that is it's supposed to be strength, representing strength, or planks, boards, which it's often used for bones. I kid you not. If you check the context of that, the otsem, that is, you can check oats in context. You're going to find very fast that oats means tree. It does work, otsem, for bones. The reason I brought that up is, for me, that's the most vexing of all of this, because everywhere else I see tsa, it does have this idea of movement. You'll see it in the words tsan, which is tsa, a, n. And that means a flock, like a flock of sheep would be tsan. And you can see the obvious, you have tsa, which has that sense of movement. You have the a, which is typically augmentive, and then the n at the end. The n, which is used very much in words that are translated as rivers, types of waters, and also in words like onen, meaning clouds. You got to think about the movement of clouds, the proceeding of clouds, or something that has this sort of proceeding. The glyph itself almost looks like a lightning bolt. They typically try to say that it is either a seed. I'm referring to those who are along the lines of like Ancient Hebrew Research Center. There's not too many people that, other than me, that differ from them when they try to get into the ancient glyphs, So anyways, they try to say that that's maybe a seed, or some might say that that's a snake. It is used in words that have to do with serpents or snakes, like Nahash, which is who or what deceived Hua, Eve, in the garden. So, the interesting thing about sa'e, the word itself, where we're at, whenever you see that a'e at the end of a word, it's virtually always going to be indicating the substance of its preceding verb. Or in this case, it's just a single glyph. I'll give you some examples. Ham, the word Ham, like Noah's son, Ham. ham. Ham is going to mean sort of churning, blending, mixing with the idea of heat as well. Anybody who knows anything about friction and movement understands that there is heat generated. It does have that connotation with it. But it is this churning, okay? You look at the word hama'e, which has that a'e at the end, and it is butter. Take a word like rapa'e, okay? You look at the root rapa. Medicine, healing, physicians, that's what you're going to find within that. Other than giant, you'll see that as rapa too, but we're not going to get into that just yet. But believe me, you see many, many occurrences of it as healing, physician, that sort of thing, okay? But when you see rapa'e, it's medicine. So you end up taking an action or verb, and you have that e on the end, and you basically have a substance of that verb. So you take tsa, which they say is coming from this root yitsa, which is definitely movement, going forth, moving, and tsa'e, making it a substance of movement. You put that in the correct context, and you have excrement, bowel movement, tsa'e. You will see tsa a lot by itself in the entry for yitsa, H3318. It's very telling in the same way as ba is very telling. So even though I can't figure out just yet why tree is oats, and anyone who listened to the last 2 episodes knows that I talked extensively on O. Now, I didn't focus, but I did talk enough about it to where you could kind of start to think on how it is that those 2 glyphs, the O, and consider its look and form and what it may be symbolizing in either action or intent, understanding, and the tsa, which has this idea of movement. So when you put the be and the tsa together, like for instance that first root bats, and I told you that it was translated mire, and then we looked at roots like shebats, which puts the sh up front. The sh, oftentimes you're going to see that relating to not necessarily the ground, but the base of something, in a sense, okay? Shabbat's meant to set something, like setting the stones from the high priest's breastplate in gold, or embroidering Shabbats, okay? The bots as mire or swamp, mud or muck. Anybody who has stepped in mud or muck knows that it has a quality to it of pulling in, sucking in. Anybody who's seen The Never-Ending Story saw Atreyu's horse get sucked into the swamps of sadness. Yeah, I know that was flippant, but even quicksand, this idea of quicksand, and who knows what words that have that bat's root actually don't mean quicksand as opposed to mire. That's a very interesting thought. So I think there is ample evidence between examining the glyphs themselves for what they can tell us in and of themselves, and then examining this biglyph in the context of all the words that we can, at least with a certain amount of certainty, say have that bats biglyph root. It seems to be a kind of a pulling within. There's it's interesting that they actually give Shabbat's the definition weave. The reason I say that is because if we go all the way back now to the first word we started with, boots, which they say is white, H948. I have to repunch it into Blue Letter Bible because I used up all of my my windows. So let me make sure I've got the English translations of it up. Okay. So the thing here, the bit of a glitch is that we have that affixed oo. Now, when you see oo at the beginning of a word, and it doesn't matter if the word is a noun or a verb, okay, a thing or an action, it's going to behave the same. It's going to be used as what most people would say is that it's a conjunction, because it's very often translated as and or but. I find that a little bit strange because and but, they're not synonyms, and neither is or. In fact, there is an OBRY word that does mean or. It's actually au. It has the u with it, but it's preceded by the a looking glyph a. Now, as I've mentioned before, when you see these affixed glyphs, oftentimes, if you do comparisons between words that are just biglyphs and words that appear to be triglyphs that have an affixed vowel or singer like u, e, a, e, o, there's either going to be a bit of variation or what seems like, depending on how they translate it, a lot of variation. And in this case, there would appear to be a great deal of difference between mire, muck, quicksand, that sort of concept, and what they're translating it as, which is white linen or linen. So it may seem confusing having that ooh in the middle until we look at actually how it works in the midst of text. It's not purely a conjunction in the way that we would think of conjunctions. When we think of conjunctions, we think of and, but, and or. They're sort of connectives, but they mean different things. They're used in different ways, and it can't be used as and, but, and or and still be the same symbol for the same thing. It has to be consistent. But if we look at it in a sense of both connecting and dividing, and the way that works is if you see a list of things, like if you're in Joshua and you see a list of cities, let's say, that one of the tribes took when they came into Canaan. Each time you'll see a new city listed, you would see the U before it. So it is adding in a way, but it is also dividing. If you don't see that U within there, you have to wonder why. This is one of the ways that translators, they sort of get away with either combining words that they shouldn't to make cities, places, names, things that probably are unnatural, or they separate things that they shouldn't. So it's important to understand how that U works in the text. So in the same way with these glyphs in a word, when, say, U is inserted between the be and the tsa, where if the bet and the tsa were by themselves, they would mean something that could appropriately be translated as mire, mud, quicksand, because of the idea of the bet being in, the tsa moving or sucking within, moving within that idea of suction. And we've confirmed that by looking at it in context with many other words. The u is connecting those two glyphs, but it's also dividing them in a sense, so that you can look at those two concepts separately. You have the concept of in or towards, with. You at least have that idea symbolized in the be, and then you have the idea of moving symbolized in the tsa, but they don't have to directly relate to one another because they have that u between them. So when you look at them like that, you could, I think you could very confidently say that you are possibly looking at weaving, to weave. If that's the case, then perhaps translating this into linen would be correct because of woven fiber. And moreover, it perhaps would be more correct to say something woven or embroidered. At first, I had the idea that perhaps we were looking at something that might be shimmering. Now, there's a reason why I thought that may be a possibility, and there is something to this. I wouldn't entirely discount it. The reason is because when you look at the Greek words down at the bottom that have been translated into white, one of the words that you're going to see, if I could click on the right one, yeah, this is it. I'm sorry. It's lamprose. It's G2986. And it's often going to be shimmering or shining. It's actually going to come from a root that is lampas. And it's actually translated as lamp, torch, or light. That one's pretty tough to disprove. I think it's actually very accurate, lamp or light. I had this idea of movement with the tsa part of it, so I thought perhaps it meant shimmering. But I don't really think so with that be at the front. I think if we think of inward and then separate but connect with the u, the tsa of moving, something woven seems very correct to me. Now, does that mean that it is, as it says in the, 9 occurrences, linen? I mean, it's either fine linen or white linen. I don't know that that's necessarily it, just because linen as a product, it is a material, like cotton. It is a material that's found or taken from within the flax stalk, and most of the whether it's, say, linen paper, we're talking about linen cloth, it is a woven material, that's true. However, there are many materials that are woven. So if it's not appearing with a modifier, I'd have a hard time believing that it was only linen. And the harder thing is, if you punch in linen for a word search, you're going to get multiple words that they translate as linen as well. One of them is actually bod. Bod's interesting. And And at some point we might talk about that. Unfortunately, bod's not going to turn up as one of the colors, and that's what we're going to be talking about for a while. So, with boots being one of the 9 words given when we punch in white, I am not sure that it is fair whatsoever to determine that boots is white, since boots is most likely to weave something woven or that sort of connotation in general. And since so many things can be weaved or woven that don't necessarily have to be white, I would say that H948 is a fail for white. Since I'm just over the 2-hour mark, I'm going to wrap this episode up. I'm going to pick up the next episode by just diving right into white and the other occurrences of white. I really hope spending the sort of time on the process that I use, to better figure out the meanings of these words, I hope you've found it helpful. I know at first a lot of this is going to seem difficult. A lot of it is difficult. But as with anything else, the more time that you spend in it, the better you're going to get at it. The more fluent you're going to get at determining words, at actually sight reading, and then figuring out these words, picking out the biglyphs in the triglyph words. As with anything else, everything with time and practice and patience. So, anyways, that is it. And I will see you in episode 5, where we dive straight into the rest of what is translated as white, with boots definitely crossed off the list. So until then, I hope everybody is very well.
Sing a song.